This all happened over a few months, whilst my friends and I were living in a certain house. It started when my friends and I decided we wanted to live together. It seemed like a good idea at the time, but it ended in tragedy. We were drinking at the pub one day, and a few drinks in with the owner of the pub, and she said she had a place for cheap that we could all move into together. So we took her up on her offer. The next day, we went to check it out. It was a 3-bedroom flat with a lounge room and kitchen. It was in pretty bad shape cleanliness-wise, but she said that she would fix it up and have it livable in a few days. So we got to organising ourselves and moving out of wherever we were living at the time. I didn't have much to bring to the house, just 2 bags of clothes and my personality. So I was the first to move in and took the bedroom on the right side of the flat, which was already had a bed and a cabinet in it. I got myself settled and comfy and walked across the road to the shop to buy myself some microwave dinner. So I ate and played on my phone in bed for a while until I felt myself falling asleep. All of a sudden, I woke to something being thrown across the room. I opened my eyes, but I couldn't see anything. I looked around a couple of seconds from the comfort of my double bed and didn't see anything else, and I drifted off back to sleep without issue until morning. When I got up, I went and ate the leftovers from the night before, made myself a coffee and lit up a cigarette. I sat there looking around, lost in my thoughts, when I noticed my toothbrush was at my feet. I looked at it for a second, thinking that it was weird when it dawned on me that my toothbrush was left on the stand beside my bed before I fell asleep. How the hell did it get there? I had no idea, and then I remembered the sound from last night and thought it possibly couldn't have been that. If it had been, it would have flown more than 4 or 5 meters from my bed to its current position. I just shrugged it off and brushed my teeth and put it back and leave for the day to help the other boys move in. I helped the other lads with their stuff, and we finally get to call the place home after a day or two of moving and settling stuff up. Fast forward to about a month in, and we'd been drinking a lot. There were 4 of us boys living in the house, the youngest being 18 and the oldest 21, living next door to a pub. And sure enough, drinking was going to be a problem, but we didn't know better then. But we had been drinking for about a month solid, and it started to affect our jobs and social lives. Our first night off the alcohol since we had all decided to move in, we had a movie night and invited some girls around, and had a pretty pleasant night. My friend Ben had dragged a mattress into the lounge room to lay in and watch movies, and ended up not moving from there the entire night. Everyone had left, and it was just me and Ben awake watching another movie, and were talking about the girls, whether we had a chance or not and the like, and eventually drifted off to sleep. What felt like an eternity later, I woke up to my first ever episode of sleep paralysis. I started to look around, and the lounge room looked oddly bright. My mind was racing because I couldn't move any of my body. I looked down to Ben and started trying to call to him to help me, but my voice was gone and nothing came out. All of a sudden, I hear a whispering in my ear. I recognized the voice as my friend David, who was asleep with his girlfriend in the other room. I could even feel the breath on my ear. The voice starts soft. "It's okay, MDiddly. Just open the door. You'll be okay, MDiddly. Just open the door. Everything will be fine if you open the door." It looped like that, getting louder and louder until he was screaming in my ear and taking on an almost demonic tone. Just as it was getting unbearable and I was fighting against my own body to move and get Ben's attention, I look up, and there on the roof is my mate David, staring at me, just floating there. But something is off about him. He's pale and he's snarling, looking straight into my soul with foul eyes. Then he changes to a white man I had never seen before, with the same look of amused disgust on his face. And then he just drops, straight from the ceiling onto me, so I close my eyes and try to scream, but nothing comes out. Just as I had closed my eyes and was waiting for the inevitable weight to fall on my body, The sleep paralysis broke, and I jumped up and ran to the front door, which was only a couple of steps from the couch. I opened it as fast as I could and ran outside and vomited straight onto the lawn. But everything felt okay as I realised I had opened the door, like my friend told me to. I felt very shook up, like everything would be okay. Are you okay, buddy? I turn around and Ben is standing there with a blanket wrapped around him, sitting in the front step lighting a cigarette. Why are you awake? I ask him. You kicked me on your way to the door in a hurry, he replied. Shit, sorry man, I just didn't feel well, I replied. All good, you want to smoke? I took him up on the offer and we stayed there for a bit, and I never told him what had happened, and we talked about other random stuff and went back to sleep. Me back on the couch and him back on his mattress. My ear was aching, and it kept aching for another couple of days. Fast forward about a week, and we had another movie night, and I had kind of started seeing one of the girls, and she decided to stay over that night. I was on top of the world when I put her in my bed, and I jumped in with her. We started getting busy under the covers, when we hear Ben scream from his mattress in the lounge room. Off! We both stop and look at each other, both with the same look of what the fuck just happened. But we think nothing of it and keep going. I was on a mission, and like hell anything was going to stop me. So I finished my business with my lady friend and go to sleep, and sleep one of the best sober sleeps I had in that place, and wait to see the girl had left. I walk groggy out into the lounge room and see the lads out at the front having morning coffee and cigarettes. I grab a cigarette for myself and head on out. We start with the usual good morning nonsense, and the boys start jibing me about the girl I had finally sealed the deal with the night before. So how did she go? Said David. She would have went alright, I reckon, Ben joined in. I would have been at peak performance if someone hadn't screamed off in the middle of it all, I replied with a smile on my face. Yeah, that was me, sorry, Ben said quietly, looking off into the distance. What the fuck happened? Were you dreaming? I continued the conversation. What he told me next sent chills to my spine. He started by saying he was asleep, and he woke to a pressure on his throat, like someone was pressing down, and he was in a state of sleep paralysis. Getting grabbed by a ghost is what he called it. He said the whole time he was trying to yell fuck off, but while under the paralysis, he was dragging out the fuck. When it released, he yelled off. I swallowed a nervous gulp and didn't say anything, and he continued on and said, You know the weird thing? As soon as I felt myself wake up, I kept my eyes closed because I was afraid of what I would see. The whole time I had my eyes closed, I could hear you, David. He turned to David and pointed to his ear. You started whispering in my ear softly at first, saying just open your eyes, mate. Just open them, it'll be okay. You'll be okay once you open your eyes. And you kept going and going, getting louder and louder until you were screaming, and it didn't sound like you anymore. He got this last part out shakily. So I listened and I opened my eyes. Then I saw you, but you looked pale and angry. But you turned away into the wall, and you were gone. Then it all just stopped. Actually, my ear still hurts. It's got me a bit creeped out, he finished. My stomach was in my throat at this point, and I blurted out that nearly the exact same thing had happened to me. Everyone looked at me strangely, and I told them my story, and as I did, I saw them all turn a paler shade of white. Then David spoke up. While we're sharing, I was in bed with Jennifer the other night, and I woke up and could see a silhouette moving around my room. I thought it was one of you guys moving around the room, so I talked to you, and it stopped moving. I said to it that the smokes were on the bench near the door, and to just help yourself. It stopped at the end of the bed, and just seemed to stare at me. I just shrugged it off, thinking you guys were still drunk, and went back to sleep. I woke up in the morning, and the smokes were on the ground on the opposite end of the room. I thought you guys were being dicks, he said, all of this looking off into the distance. unsure whether he was believing what he was saying. What didn't occur to me at the time was if it was one of you, it was silent. No sounds in my room at all. No footsteps, not even any breathing. I didn't think anything of it until now. Ben and I both confirmed it wasn't us, and we all stood silently for a moment before the local postie came and delivered our mail, and we spoke to him for a bit while he had a cigarette with us. We forgot about it until the next incident that occurred. After our last few incidences, we were on edge for a little while, jumping at every creak and bang in the house. It wasn't until at least a month or two later that the two of the boys and I decided to leave for work about 6 hours northwest of our town. Work was scarce at this time in our town, and we got a good offer elsewhere. So the night before, we packed our bags and tried to get a good night's sleep. We had a long drive ahead of us and needed the rest. I was in my bed in my room, with one of the boys down beside me on a swag, a waterproof sleeping bag with a mattress. We both eventually drifted off to sleep. I don't know for how long, but I awoke to someone whispering my name softly. The voice sounded like my friend David again, but slightly disembodied. I woke up and looked down at my mate on the floor. He was snoring his head off and oblivious to the sound, but I could still hear it. It was slowly getting louder, and I looked to the left corner of my room, and standing there was the same man I had seen drop from the ceiling in a previous encounter. He was smiling at me, but it was the most sinister smile I had ever seen. All of a sudden, he stopped smiling and charged at me from the corner of the room. My head was filled with a manic-sounding laughter, and I shit about 1,000 bricks and threw myself towards off of the bed to avoid the oncoming attack, landing squarely on my mate, who let out a loud oof sound and proceeded to start swinging at me. I was wide awake by now, so I jumped up and looked around the room, quickly trying to find the man, my fists at the ready to fight. He was gone. No one was there except me and my mate. "What the fuck are you doing?" my mate said. "Sorry, man," I replied, still scanning the room. "Why the fuck were you laughing like that? It scared me." "I didn't laugh. I saw the man again." "Fuck off, idiot. I'm going back to sleep, but don't think I'll let you get away with this." "Yeah, okay," I replied, still too worried that this thing might show up again. He eventually drifted off back to sleep, and after some time, so did I. But it wasn't an easy sleep. I had constant nightmares about the man laughing and slept uneasy for the rest of the night. We woke up early and we left for our stint in central QLD, and were gone for about 5 or 6 months, of which nothing of note happened because we spent most of our time either drunk, high, or both. However, we had left one of our mates at the house. He lived there the 5 or 6 months alone. We didn't hear much from him, apart from the odd phone call. Eventually, the work dried up and we headed home, forgetting all about the events that had taken place before. And for the next few weeks, everything was good. Until we were at the pub one night, talking to an old shearer who came through town. We all got to talking with him, and he was telling stories about himself back in the day and so on. And the conversation turned on to losing people to suicide. He went on telling his story of a bloke he knew, who seemed happy as Larry on the outside, but one day, he just decided to end it. And he pointed to our house next door and said, "Right there out the back of that place, off the roof of the black veranda." We all looked at each other a little unsettled and kept drinking. Drinking so much that our memory of that conversation was gone from our mind by the end of the night. Our drinking had gotten so bad at this point. Every night we celebrated something and drank to excess. All of us unemployed and burning through money like it didn't mean a thing. Things started to take a dark turn. We'd come home and plates were broken or furniture was moved, but we never heard anything, probably because most of the time we were too drunk. My girl had left me, and I was in a dark place, finding my comfort in a bottle and making damn sure I didn't run out. I ended up getting myself into trouble and had to lay low at my mum's for a while. when I got a phone call that my other mate had moved out of the house as well and went about 4 hours east for work. A week later, my other mate followed and left Ben in the house alone. I would briefly drop in to see him or send care packages of cigarettes and booze in with my mum, but I'd become a full-blown hermit and started not leaving and just drinking in my little one-room place at my mum's out of town. A week or so later, I got a visit from a dear friend who came to get me out of my slump and take me to the city, fix me up with a job and sort me out. It all happened very quick, and I called Ben on my way out of town, and he sounded genuinely happy for me, but also distant at the same time. I didn't think anything of it, continued to live my life for the next 3 months, really getting somewhere and being happier than I've ever been. I had almost completely wiped the events of that house from my mind and had hardly heard from Ben, but not through lack of trying, when one day I received a phone call at 5 a.m. from my mum. She was hard to understand, and I felt my stomach drop, but still didn't understand what had happened. She was talking through tears and telling me to ready myself. I asked her what the hell was going on. Ben had been found that morning, hanging from the back veranda of the house. I was devastated, and even now, I'm getting sad writing about this. Rest in peace, my mate. You'll never be forgotten. My girlfriend and I were on our way to work between 4:30 and 5 a.m. this morning. We were driving along and talking as we usually do, when I get the feeling to look out the window. I was facing forward and looking at the sides of the roads for animals before this, and as I look out the window, I see a looming black figure that was quite large. There wasn't much light on it, but I saw no details as it was blacker, seemed to reflect no light, than anything I've ever seen. Even through the grass around it was slightly illuminated. It was like an ill-shaped moose, but in size only. It was also hard to tell if it was on all fours or hunched over. No antlers. My girlfriend was driving and she asked, "Was that an animal there? I didn't see it ahead of us." I answered, "Yeah, it must have been. I didn't see it either until it was beside us." We both were suddenly overcome with fear, and the car filled with a very strong smell of blood. A strong iron smell of blood. It was incredibly strong, and we both immediately commented on it and were almost overwhelmed. We have never before or since smelt that in her car, nor have we any other place. We drove back past on our way home, and again, no smell of blood. Even the exhaust from other cars in front of us is barely noticeable when we're in her car compared to mine. I felt her pick up the pace even though we had already passed it by a bit. She was driving around 75 kilometers an hour and sped up to around 80 or 85. The smell eventually dissipated, and we were kind of felt scratching our heads and feeling kind of excited but on edge. We live in a rural town in western Sweden, about 30 kilometers east of Gothenburg. I'm quite into this sub, and I can't think of where else to post because Google is giving me nothing specific keywords. Anyone have any clue what it might have been? As it was definitely not an animal native to this part of Sweden, and seemed bigger than a moose. I've seen other weird stuff in Sweden and Australia, but nothing that resembles this. Any help is appreciated. This venom or happening or what have you has been going on in my life for nearly 30 years. I'm almost 50, and this started in my early 20s. I've been visiting the same place over and over again for all that time, though the dreams have trickled to once or twice a year. And the place isn't even weird. It's substantial. It's normal and quiet, and I never ever see any people. This thing or proclivity started with a single night of dreams. In the first part of the night, I was in an area by an ocean. The very white cliffs of Dover, though I've never been there. In real life, I woke up for a couple of hours. When I went back to sleep, I was in the same place, but it was now night, and I was some ways away from the coast now. Something about this dream or series of dreams triggered an ability or something, because I then started dreaming regularly about one place. Now, it wasn't the same place by the sea I had dreamed about at first, entirely different place. And over the years, I found myself in different parts of this state or what have you. Again, there's nothing really freaky about it. I know some raw facts. It was popular with honeymooners and had resorts at one time, but now it's very quiet. The cemeteries are on a hill because it is prone to flooding. Mountains abound around it. I know the roads all around it and where each goes, and I've drawn maps from all the dreams together. I sort of just feel when I am there. Smells, the way the sun hits things, and it was so peculiar to me because I was living in the south when the dream started, though I live out west now. But at that time, I had never been out west, and something about the angle of the sun was just odd. It wasn't until I went out west that I realised that was what I was seeing. The way the west feels, it's definitely out west. Which is a whole other story, and a long one, and I'm not really seeking to get a sort of ESP answer about it all. Dreams and me. I've had several in my life that prophesize things that were about to happen. Doesn't happen all the time, but it's happened. I just wonder why one dreams about places like that, and if they are actually real at all. I always wonder about their substance. Is this me telling stories to myself? Why am I telling myself this story, which is not really a story, as I never interact with people there? Everything is quiet, maybe a passing car, but it's unexciting. Nothing happens. No talking animals, I'm not naked, I don't see my dead father. Nothing at all ever like that. Just humdrum strolling through a half-empty town. It's so fucking cocktail. I keep hoping in life to be driving along someday, and suddenly, bam, there it is, just like I dreamed, with this super elevated freeway going over between two mountains, with the town at the bottom. I would know if I ever find it. I never have. I'd love to hear if anyone else has had experiences like this, and what the fuck we call this as well. I've got no clue. I'm a 32-year-old man, from and currently living in Cumberland County, New Jersey, which puts me about 40 minutes away from Philadelphia, and about the same away from the Atlantic Ocean, while at the same time being only about 15 minutes away from Delaware Bay. After high school, I went into the army as an intelligence analyst for a while. Then when I got out, I moved to New York City and worked as a project manager for a construction company, until I met my wife and decided to move back to New Jersey to be closer to our family, since she was pregnant with our daughter. That's just some background on me. So this happened in October of 2018. It was about 11:45 at night, and I decided to go on my front steps to smoke a couple of cigarettes before I tried to fall asleep. Everybody else in the house was already sleeping. It was a pretty clear night without many clouds in the sky, but there was some fog on the ground. As I was smoking, I was looking at the fog, and to me, it looked like there was movement in it. I know it sounds crazy, but it was almost like there was an invisible or camouflaged things out there that I wouldn't be able to see if it wasn't for the fog hanging on the ground. As I was looking at the fog, I noticed this white truck that had driven by 2 times at this point. I could hear a man and woman yelling at each other when the truck stops at the stop sign in front of my house, and the woman gets out screaming at the man, then slams the door as he pulls off fast, then proceeds to walk into the woods across the streets from me, which is really weird because there just isn't anything back there except for blue holes until you hit the bay. If I walk out of my front door and just keep walking straight, there won't be any houses or civilization at all. Only trees and artificial lakes, blue holes. left over from sand plants until you hit the Delaware Bay. So at this point, it's been about 5 minutes since the woman walked into the woods, when things started going from weird to absolutely unbelievably scary, strange, and the most reality-shattering thing that has ever happened to me. I'm still looking at the movement that I'm seeing in the fog, when I hear this very loud noise come from the woods that sounded like metal being ripped apart. There really isn't a good example I can give for that sound because it was so unearthly. I'm sure it wasn't a natural sound. That sound lasted for about 10 to 15 seconds, then abruptly stopped and was replaced with a different sound which I can feel more than I can hear. Imagine being aware that there's a huge sound happening by you, but it's out of the frequency that your ears can hear. That's the best way I can describe it. This sound is a constant through the rest of this experience. This is the point where I'll probably lose some people, and I'm aware of how crazy this all sounds. But as I'm getting adjusted to the sound, it feels like something reaches out to me mentally in my own head, but does so without words and can only conveys a feeling of calm and a heads up or warning for what's about to happen. It kind of felt like whatever it was feeling me out to see how I would react to what I was currently experiencing, like a security check. As I was having this feeling of calm conveyed to me, I noticed a light in the sky that seemed to have risen out of the woods, I would say about 5 or 6 miles away from me. At this point, it's only a ball of light in the distance, but I just knew that it was coming right towards me, although it wasn't moving very fast. Right after, I noticed the light in the sky is when I start to get really freaked out, more than I've ever been in my life. In the woods across the street from me, which is no more than 50 yards, all these orbs of light start to appear. I could see some which seemed to flicker into existence. These orbs were all white light, which didn't light up the area around them, like you would expect from flashlights. There were probably about 12 to 16 of them, which moved in a totally smooth manner. Besides the trail to get into the woods, the area is so dense and invested with sticker-thorn bushes, it simply wouldn't be possible for people to move where the lights were moving, let alone to do it completely smoothly. I really am positive that they weren't people with flashlights because of the area and the characteristics of the light orbs themselves. So I'm just watching the orbs move around for about a minute, trying to make sense of what it is I'm seeing, when I look back up to the sky to find a craft coming practically right towards me, with it only being about 1,000 yards away at this point. So I'm going back and forth looking at the orbs on the ground and the craft which I start to make out better. It was flying very, very low. I'd say it was only about 3.5 to 4 stories off the ground. I see the path it's taking and see it's going to pass right in front of me at an angle, in which I'll be able to see underneath the craft and the side of it at the same time. The craft was a single-story, dull black rectangle. I could see underneath the craft and saw that the rectangle was made up of 3 smaller rectangle panels that fit together to form a larger rectangle. I clearly saw that the craft was made up of 3 panels. The size is a harder estimate, but I would say it was about 35 yards long and 20 yards across. Underneath, there were lights flashing in a pattern which would cycle through, then cycle back the other way. In that moment, I thought that the craft was signalling to the orbs on the ground. It didn't make any sound at all. All I was hearing is the same buzzing or humming noise that I felt more than I heard. While it was in front of me, it was moving really slow to the point where I don't think a plane with a normal propulsion system could even stay in the air at that speed. I take my eyes off the craft and look back down at the orbs, which are still moving all around, though one was starting to cross the street in front of me. I only took my eyes off the craft for a moment when I looked at the orbs, but when I looked back, the craft was gone. For whatever reason, when I saw the craft just vanish like that, the reality of what I was seeing really hit home, and I got scared, to be honest with you, since my daughter, wife, and mom were all no more than 50 feet away from all of this craziness I was watching. So I went inside and locked the doors. I just felt like I'd be willing to investigate more if it was just my life I was playing with, but I wasn't willing to take that chance with my family's lives. I could have just been paranoid at this point, but I felt like I was being watched for the next 2 hours. I didn't have any lost time from this event, and the entire thing happened only over a period of 20 to 30 minutes. Looking back on the event now, I question what exactly was going on with the white truck and the woman who walked into the woods. I've also done some research and found that there are a good number of reports of people seeing a glimmer man in the woods, which make me think of the movement I was seeing in the fog. Where I live is a very active area for UFO phenomenon, which makes sense if something wanted to have access to major cities like Philadelphia, New York City, Baltimore, and DC. What could possibly be a better place to hide than an almost inaccessible 1,000 feet deep lake in the middle of the woods? Something strange happened that I thought was pretty up to par with some of the stories I read on here. I got off work earlier tonight at 9 PM and decided to stop by the gas station on my way home. It's right next to my work, so I figured I'd grab some stuff for the night, since my girl was coming over later. We planned to order pizza and watch movies, but I really wanted a Monster energy drink and a couple other things. I pull up to the gas station and get out, when a fairly younger looking guy walked up to me with his bicycle. He was a clean guy, didn't look homeless, he had a backpack that was camo coloured, usually found in the army, and had a pretty nice looking bike. He said, "Excuse me sir, but I've been riding all day and I'm very hungry. Could you help me out? I just want some food." I felt bad for the guy and said sure, so I told him to come with me in the gas station. I told him to get like $10 worth of food and drinks, and he smiled and said okay. When he got to the counter, I started talking to him, asking how old he was and where he was going. He said he was 27, same age as me, and said he was travelling across the country, but didn't give a reason. He told me his name, we'll call him Isaac, and said he was born on an Air Force base in Kansas. I asked where his family was, and he said in the country Trinidad. Strange, but whatever. I didn't want to ask too many questions. I just wanted to help this guy out. We start to leave and he thanked me for the food. I said no problem, and said be careful, God is always with you. When I said that, he said, "Oh, you believe in God? What else do you believe in?" I kid you not when I say I spent the next 20 plus minutes talking to this guy outside of the gas station. This guy was clearly smart and not on drugs or anything else like that. He talked very clearly and had a great vocabulary. He starts telling me he's seen a lot of strange things in this world and begins telling me a very strange story. He said he was in another state before he came to mine and was riding his mountain bike way too fast going down a hill. He said at one point a car turned from a street on his left and was now coming towards him. He said at that point he was going way too fast and his bicycle should have clearly hit this car head on. When he was inches away, he said he closed his eyes and braced for impact. But when he opened his eyes, he was stopped in the road on the opposite side of the car that he originally was. He told me the people in the car got out and screamed, "How the hell are you not dead? You came right at us." But Isaac said that he had no idea what happened or how he got to the opposite side of the car. According to him, he should be dead or at least in a really bad shape, but he didn't have a single scratch on him when it happened. He also had been going very fast, but was completely still when he opened his eyes. He told me that was the weirdest thing he's ever experienced, and for some reason, I believe him. Even though I just met the guy, his testimony seemed very real, and I think he experienced something like a glitch. Josh is in his mid-30s currently, but this story takes place when he was 10 years old. He said that one day he was hanging with his dad. A man came to visit his dad at home. When the man arrived, Josh's father told him to go into another room while his father and the man talked. Josh, being the curious kid that he was, left the room but kept the door to the room slightly cracked so that he could hear what the adults were going to talk about. Josh said that a few minutes into their conversation, all seemed normal, but it all quickly changed. He said the man who came to visit his dad was having a normal conversation when all of a sudden the guy's voice changed dramatically. Josh said the guy's voice would change while talking to his dad, so much that Josh thought there were 3 people in the room talking instead of 2. He said the man's other voice kept getting louder and meaner as it changed. He said the man would be calm, talking normally, and then he would start yelling horrible things. Then he would calm down and speak softer again. At this point, the man would speak in his normal voice, then switch mid-sentence to a loud, angry voice every minute or so. He said at some point, he heard the man say to his father in a distorted voice, "I'm going to kill you." Josh freaked out, shut the door, and ran to his room until the 2 were finished talking. Not long after, the man finally left and Josh went back to talk to his dad. He asked his dad what happened with that man, but he told Josh not to worry about it and that he just had to help the man with something. To this day, Josh thinks his father had performed some sort of ritual or exorcism to rid this man of a demon of sorts. He said it's the scariest thing he's ever witnessed, hands down. He said after this day, he became a firm believer in the paranormal. So last night, I was watching a movie on Hulu called A Glitch in the Matrix with my girlfriend. I highly suggest you check it out if you haven't already, as it was very interesting and even talked about similar glitches that I've read about in this sub. As I'm watching this with my girlfriend, she starts getting really into it and told me she had never heard of glitches in the Matrix. As we're watching, she tells me that something strange happened to her recently that she couldn't explain. My girlfriend was very close with her grandma, who just recently passed away. Her grandma was very into wind chimes. She collected them and owned a very specific wind chime that my girlfriend loved. It always hung on her grandma's front porch, and when her grandma died, she wanted to go to the house to retrieve it, as it was very special to her. The day after her grandma died, she goes to the house to help clean it out with her family. My girlfriend stressed that the only item she wanted from the house was that specific wind chime. When she got to the house, she said her and her family could not locate those wind chimes anywhere in the house. They always hung outside and her grandma never took them down. However, they couldn't find them anywhere. They looked all over the house from top to bottom with no luck. After hours of cleaning, they decided to give up, as they figured the wind chimes had probably gotten lost during the cleaning of her grandmother's house. Fast forward a couple of months, my girlfriend said one day she was driving past her grandma's old house. Someone else had moved in by this point, and decided to stop and look at the house, as it held many memories. Guess what she saw on the front porch? Yep, the wind chimes that she and her family looked for the whole day. They were even hung in the exact same place her grandma had them before she died. She said that this was impossible as no one in her family claimed they ever found them or hung them back up. To this day, those chimes are still hanging in the same spot. My girlfriend said she has debated knocking on the door of that house to ask the people if she could have them back, as they are her favourite item of her grandma's. She said she swears that there is no way that her family and all missed them when they were cleaning up grandma's house. I have a feeling that the people who live there now don't even know what those wind chimes are hanging out there. Perhaps it's her grandma sending her a sign that she's okay.